and David on here. Hi, everyone. Hi, Simon. Let's see. Hi, everybody. Let's see. Hi. Okay. Trying to bring in Leah and David from the ranch. Hi. There they are. Hello.
Let's get closer together.
We can go either direction.
I guess it won't really matter much for us. Maybe we'll just do that for ease.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Let's see. Make sure we can see you. Leah, you're there you are. Aha. Great. Hi. For anybody joining in, we are sort of both in rainy Colorado this afternoon, wherever you are joining from. I hope you are having nice weather. We are, I think, appreciating the rain because wildfires are nearby, and so any rain we will gratefully accept. So for anybody joining in, this is our kind of weekly, end of week, kind of slow on down, you know, check in with different creative folks in different places. And today I will let each of you kind of introduce yourselves, I guess, however you want. But I'm joined by two lovely colleagues from Anderson Ranch. So we're sort of not in the same place, but we're neighbors. And so I do just want to say before I let Leah and David jump in and introduce themselves and then we kind of get into our conversation, for anybody who does have comments or questions while we go, feel free to type them in. Leah and David are obviously kind of across the table and away from their computer, but I'm going to pay attention to comments and questions. So if you have any that you'd like to type in, I will read them out so that everybody can hear and respond. So maybe do we want to start out by just having the two of you introduce yourselves, whatever you'd like to say? Yeah.
We're going to kind of switch off and on masks.
Okay. We're trying to be mindful of our social distancing and our good COVID etiquette. I appreciate it. I understand.
Well, I'm Leah Aegerter. I am the studio coordinator for digital fabrication here at Anderson Ranch, and I'm also a sculptor and work mostly in wood and metal in my own studio practice.
How's it going, everyone? My name is David Wang. I am the Director of Culinary Arts and Operations here at Anderson Ranch. And I'm the sort of chef here as well, and then sort of the unofficial ramen monster of the valley.
Ramen monster. I feel like I feel like you should have business cards that just say David Wong, ramen monster. So what we kind of thought, so basically, just to frame this conversation for anybody watching a little bit, we kind of thought it would be interesting to have a conversation because obviously, Leah and David are both working at the ranch, but you're working in two different disciplines, but both kind of thinking about some of the same ideas across those disciplines. So we kind of, in thinking about how we wanted to approach this conversation, thought it would be interesting to maybe pose some of the common ideas and then see how you want to respond. So, and again, if anybody else wants to chime in or has ideas as you watch or questions, feel free. So I will get us started. I guess maybe just to say, I think maybe thinking a little bit about how things have changed this summer, like with the pandemic kind of shifting our realities. Maybe it would be helpful to sort of frame like what a normal summer would have been for you and how has your summer been different this year instead?
Sure. So normally in the studios at the ranch, we run summer workshops in person. You know, we have between 150 and 200 students taking a class any given week. And we just have workshops going, 1 or 2 week workshops throughout the whole summer. So for me, it's a lot of, you know, meeting new artists who are students and faculty, and just like having a bustling campus. And then this summer, we've adapted virtually, so we've been running virtual workshops in the different departments that can host a virtual workshop. So, you know, we're not doing woodworking workshops online, but for digital fabrication, I've been doing software-based virtual workshops.
Okay.
So for the cafe and the culinary program here, you know, up until now, the ranch has historically been a more of a cafeteria style service, commissary style service, which basically includes components like a salad bar, cafeteria line / buffet line, self-service coffee and beverages. And this summer, we've really transitioned things into a a la carte and made-to-order system. So everything is made by the staff and served individually versus being sort of out and self-serve. And that's including our beverage program too, which now we have a full espresso program, we have specialty drinks, we have made-to-order teas. So everything we can possibly do to mitigate the, I guess, exposure of food and cross-contamination potential. So that's a very major change of the cafe this summer.
And you just started there, David, right? In the middle of this pandemic?
I started here early June. So it's kind of a silver lining in the sense that we're not super busy, which allows us to make these changes. Otherwise, I know historically the ranch is super busy during this time of year, where it's just a struggle to keep up with the volume. Whereas now we actually get the time to do it properly and do it right and integrate all these new programs.
So maybe that, I think one of the things that we talked about in the lead up to this was thinking about how that sense of time and pace has really changed. So maybe that's kind of a good place to start kind of digging in deeper, is like, how do you feel like that pace has changed? It's like the pace of dining everywhere, I think, has changed, but like are people like taking food and sitting outside? Are people spending not much time over their meal?
I feel like the general experience has shortened. People aren't spending 2 hours at a meal. They're sort of in and out quickly. The social aspect of dining is still there. People are still trying to eat together to some extent, at least. But that sort of longer experience is not as common. Just from what I've seen, definitely not at the ranch, and just from my limited exposure out in restaurants and whatnot, seems like it's a little bit different as well.
And Leah, how has that pace kind of changed with workshops being run so differently this summer?
On the one hand, you have a shortened amount of time together because we're not eating meals together. We're not hanging out after class. So we're together for an hour and a half, and then we have individual sessions in the afternoons or something. But on the other hand, I've been running the digital fabrication virtual workshops 5 or 6 days over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. And this has been really beneficial for computer and software learning because it allows students the time to digest the information. And I've actually seen far greater progress through this model than I have in the 5-day intensive workshops that we do in person at the ranch in terms of learning software.
It's interesting because I feel like there have been some things throughout this whole period of time that feel very slowed down, and then some things that feel very sped up. But maybe there's one thing that kind of like that slowing down can be a little bit of a benefit. Oh, and there's one person is asking, what software are you mainly using?
So everything's based in 3D modeling. So we've done a lot of different things, but Rhino 3D and Fusion 360 are the main 3D modeling softwares that we've used. We've also done a few other Autodesk programs like Mesh Mixer and other programs that aid in 3D scanning and repairing 3D scans digitally.
And that kind of brings up another thing, because I feel like that relationship between like the communal experience and the individual experience is also something that has shifted so much for so many people. And do you feel like maybe because you've got your mask off already, Leah, but like how do you feel? Because I feel like usually for anybody watching who has not been to the ranch, like as you were both saying, it's like this very kind of communal, bustling hive feeling of everyone being in this place and experiencing something together. But you also were saying that you were seeing students really take in some of these concepts with the software that you were working with in an easier way now that it was slower. So like, did that lead to more of a community feeling with people, even if they were not physically present? Or I don't know, just like, how did that relationship between individuality and the communal go this summer?
I would say for the workshops, that's been the hardest thing to replicate from the virtual versus the in-person experience, is that communal aspect. We've tried different things in different workshops, like having everyone logged on to the Zoom call and just working on their own, but like maybe still having a little bit of a dialogue. We've also tried to increase like small group sharing, so I would have students go into breakout rooms on Zoom, and everyone would have to share their screen and share what they were working on, and that helped a little bit too. But you really are missing that continued conversation over lunch and dinner. So it's good and bad. I mean, as
And how has that, I mean, I know, David, you already said you've kind of shifted from these more like communal dining style, buffet and cafeteria kind of self-service beverages, that sort of stuff, to this a la carte model. But how have you noticed that? Like, does that affect people's experience of the food or experience with each other in the cafe?
Well, it's interesting because I guess before the culinary program here really targeted staff, students, and faculty, whereas this year we're starting to see a lot more community members coming in, just people from around the neighborhood. Like we even have a family that comes in twice a week, that just didn't know we were doing this, and now all of a sudden this has become their favorite spot. So there's that sort of community aspect, which is interesting. It's definitely a new dynamic that is probably different. And then as far as the existing demographic, I don't know. I feel like it almost allows people to try different things, whereas before it's like this is just what you have and you have to pick from the selection. Whereas now, I mean, our menu changes once a week, our menu changes every week, and so that really allows both our staff, the cafe staff, to really flex the creativity and try different cuisine, try different recipes, really just test things out and have fun with it. And honestly, the more fun we have with it, the better the food comes out. And then on the opposite side of it, as guests and diners, they are then able to really just see a plethora of different cuisine, which is always fun. And so I think there's almost a new excitement about the cafe and the menu and the food in general. So again, talking about silver linings and things being sort of double-edged and two-sided, like it's kind of fun.
Well, and I feel like that is one thing that I was reflecting on, like after we were talking in preparation for this conversation, was just how it doesn't feel like it's just like there was the before times and then there's the after times. It's like, it's not like, well, things used to be good and now they're bad, or things used to be bad and now they are good. It's just kind of like changes, right? It's like just shifts.
Got flipped, it's a sort of slow progress of adapting to the new reality of how things are, and then you see sort of again the pros and cons of this process. But it's not all bad. So it's just a different dynamic, in that us as humans need to sort of adapt to.
I know it's that like adaptability piece is something that I'm trying to take heart from in this time, where it's like seeing all of the creative responses that people have come up with, right? That it wasn't just about, putting out like one idea of what a workshop can be. Like you were trying different things, or it's not about like, okay, fine, here's just like the one thing that we will make a ton of and package as food that you can just like grab and go. It's like you're changing the menu and, kind of bringing community members in different ways. Like I think that is the stuff that is sort of encouraging me these days is seeing that flexibility. And I guess that's also sort of like, how have you found, like, are there things that you want to keep out of this moment? I mean, assuming, and I think we're all hoping and assuming that at some point we will be able to go back to doing things like have in-person workshops at the ranch, But are there things that you have found during this time that you kind of want to hold on to? Like some of those silver linings, or?
Well, I mean, for me, it almost seems like the attention to just cleanliness and health and sort of that consciousness of that has drastically gone up. Everyone is more careful about washing their hands, and as a food service provider, that's only a good thing for us. Everyone is much more careful about glove usage and keeping things sanitized and clean, and all of that. And again, like I can only see that being a positive for someone that prepares food. That's for me. That's like the major takeaway that I would like to see continue even after all this blows over. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say in terms of work here at the ranch, the virtual workshops have been the next best thing to regular workshops, but they've had actually been really great in many ways. The first being that they've been more accessible to a larger demographic. We've had students coming from all over the world to take the virtual workshops. They've also been cheaper, which allows lower income students to take our workshops and to take more of them. Students don't have to get here and they don't have to stay here. So that's been one really wonderful thing about this. In terms of my digital classes, I've gotten feedback from a few teachers who said that this works so well for learning software that we should do 2-week workshops in digital fabrication, where the first week is virtual and the second week students come to the ranch and use the facilities and actually output what they've created in the first week of the workshop, which is, maybe it's not going to happen next year, but maybe it's something to think about for the future. And then I think, we're just going to continue the virtual workshops through the fall and the spring and keep having them in the off season as a way to stay connected to our community.
Yeah, that's sort of nice. It's like it doesn't have to be so concentrated into one season. You can spread them out.
Yeah.
Do you find, I'm trying to like phrase this diplomatically, do you find that there has been tension between like we were talking a little bit about like that tension between kind of like the traditional like approaches to whether it's art making or kind of family style dining, or you know, like the things that people have come to expect as the normal routine, versus like this switch into kind of new modes. I don't know whether maybe it's not just this summer, but I think just like there's some interesting like in that tension between like, you know, people not wanting the kind of like faster dining experience, or people like wanting to bring more of the, because Leah, you were also saying that you usually are working with other you know, workshops and other materials as well. It's not like just a digital fabrication as the be all and end all. I don't know, like maybe there's, how have you kind of observed that tension shifting in the past or now, I guess, the tension between like this sort of like new digital or new faster individual kind of modes versus that like traditional hands-on communal shared kind of thing?
I guess I would say that folks kind of understand that they can't have both right now, especially when they're taking one of our virtual workshops. I've included like a fabricated component to many of my online classes, so I'll produce a student's final project on the 3D printer, laser cutter, or CNC router, but it's like the digital fabrication studio is a completely interdisciplinary space, so we serve other departments on campus. So we'll run workshops where we laser etch wood and plexiglass for printmaking, or we CNC molds out of foam or plaster and cast slip, or translate that into any number of materials from metal to ceramics to plastics. So that's been missing, and I guess, you know, the folks who are really traditional artists aren't necessarily like jumping on the opportunity to take a digital fabrication class, because I think if anything, during this time we've all had so much screen time that for an artist who works in wood, I think they probably just want to like step away from the screen and go to their shop or whittle something at their kitchen table. But I mean, there are the few people who are using this as the opportunity to like learn their new skill on the computer, whatever that might be.
It's interesting. It's like, it makes me wonder like what all the kind of new mixed media or like hybrid creative projects coming in the near future, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna keep, you know, like so many galleries are doing online exhibitions, and I think there are a lot of things like that that are gonna stay even after we're allowed to be in person, because it's nice to be so accessible to so many people. But I don't know, as a kind of a traditional maker myself, I'm definitely finding myself like not doing any digital fabrication in my work right now, and like kind of doing that for work, and then in my own studio practice, just like doing everything by hand, because I just want to be the material.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I don't know, David, I feel like you like some of what we talked about this like idea of kind of like defying previous traditions of like culinary expectation was kind of also seeming quite relevant these days. Like that needing to go with that flexibility that everybody is being asked to pull upon. But how do you feel like that's kind of coming into the way you're thinking about food and food preparation?
I mean, largely just, you know, due to the, I want to say the social aspect of dining, right? Again, we kind of go back to that point. It's such a huge part of what dining out means. You know, the shared plates, for example, things like the, you know, charcuterie board. Or normally, for me, I actually love doing those because you really get to kind of play with the plating on that. and get as crazy or as elaborate or as simple as you want. But that's an item that kind of becomes a little bit more difficult to just kind of to put out now, whereas before you could put out a giant tray for 50 people and call it good. Things like a lot of Eastern Asian food is shared. A lot of family style meals. A lot of that is again sort of out the window for at least for the dining experience here in America. I don't know quite how it is in the rest of the world, but for here you don't see those large large spreads anymore, and that's to some extent limiting. But on the opposite side of it, and then sort of allows us to really play with the individual plates and work on that more, shifting our focus to things that are more single portioned or just quick dining, I guess, casual. So that's sort of the change I see, and that's sort of the struggle I see too when it comes to the social. Again, back to the social aspect of dining, the lack of ability to have these larger groups together. You definitely see a little pushback from that, just from guests and diners and whatnot. People still want to eat together, and they still want to. Right? I think the state rule right now is 8 to a table, and it's like, yeah, some groups are definitely larger than that, and you can't just split them up. So it's like that's a large part of the pushback, and but on the positive side of that though, we're forced to adapt, forced to change the way we think about food, and forced to come up with new dishes, and that should be the fun part.
I mean, it also makes me think similar to thinking about what new kind of mixed media artworks may come out of this time. It's like what new trends in food or plating or group gathering around eating may be developed now that will kind of stick around. And I also should say, before I forget, one person asked earlier in the comments if there are vegan options in the cafe.
Absolutely is, yeah. Not really intentionally, it just kind of happened to work out that way, but we absolutely do have vegan, vegetarian. For example, this past week I was running a dessert that was gluten-free and dairy-free. Again, just happened to work out. So,
so you're testing out new recipes. So, I mean, I feel like both of you have these fields, and you've talked about this, each of you have talked about this a little bit, where there's this potential for some really strong opinions that are very counter to each other, right? With food, obviously people's taste in food, but also kind of how they like to eat, right? Like you've said, what's the social experience that is people's norm or people's expectation for dining? And then whether they want those new trends or whether they're really just holding on to no, I prefer this the way that it used to be. Or, Leah, I think we were talking with digital fabrication versus that more traditional hand crafted kind of art making process. And they're not always counter to each other, of course, but I think that was an interesting commonality that we were talking about between your two fields of people have quite strong opinions. And I wonder, maybe it's not just about this summer, but in general, as you have kind of gone through your career and thinking about this career, how do you kind of approach those places where things get very polarized, or what are your kind of takes on where you want to see these two different fields go?
With food, you see this progression of technology being more and more involved. You see trends like the modernist pantry, usage of things like xanthan gum, carrageenan, guar, various, I guess, chemicals, for lack of a better term. But they're food chemicals. They're used to either stabilize or gel or change a texture, change a color, change the physical state of something. And you see a lot of that in that sort of this modern cooking that you see around the country. And also just usage of equipment, things like the sous vide machine or the anti-griddle or a centrifuge or things that you probably would expect to find in a science lab, but not necessarily in a kitchen. You see this sort of polarizing dynamic between traditional or classic chefs that think that, you should know how to cook a steak on a grill or in a pan without having to rely on an immersion circulator. Or you should utilize a tomato as a tomato versus trying to pull out this clear distilled tomato juice and turning it into a foam or a gel or whatever. And so there's definitely this sort of back and forth between the traditional, kind of like what Leah was talking about earlier about traditional mediums versus technology and the digital world. You definitely see that crossed over to the culinary world as well. And then just kind of more directly speaking of the printing aspect, you do see some companies that are actually printing food. They're printing, they started off with printing cakes and printing edible ink, things like that. To now, I believe I've seen articles about people will be able to isolate animal protein and be able to print out a steak, which now you're starting to veer into that sort of line between like what's crossing the line, what is what's unnatural now. But then the argument there is, well, this is a truly cruelty-free meat. It's not a plant substitute. It's not a plant-based replacement or anything like that. But it's actual meat. It's just nothing had to be killed for it. So you kind of see that crossover and that sort of polarizing dynamic when it comes to tech and food. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess for me, I like being a traditional maker and a digital maker. I see the two as so intertwined. Like I didn't learn how to 3D model until my senior year of college, and up until then I had only done traditional types of making. So when I learned how to do digital fabrication, I already knew how to make most of the things I wanted to make by hand, and that really helped me to maybe not put the digital on so much of a pedestal, because there are so many things that are way faster to do by hand than to do digitally, but also vice versa. Like if I wanted to cut a perfect circle out of a piece of wood, I could do so on the bandsaw, or I could make a jig for the router, but I could do it in 5 minutes on the laser cutter. So I think my goal in the Fab Lab at the ranch is to get people to see and benefit from that interdisciplinary nature, and to kind of understand like when's the time to use digital and when's the time to use traditional methods of making. But you're always going to have the person who wants to make a chair by hand and they don't want to learn how to 3D model, and that's totally fine. I think the danger in digital fabrication is when you just make like a laser cut sign or a 3D printed object out of plastic, and that kind of ends up being your end goal. I think it's the most interesting when it's used as a step of translation. And so yeah, that's always my goal when introducing students to the medium and to the technology.
It's funny too, because I feel like, David, like some of the things that you've talked about with food too, it's like whatever process, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression from talking to you has been that it's sort of like whatever process will allow you to kind of achieve that desired creative outcome, right? Whether that is like a beautifully plated bowl of ramen or a tomato foam that's, perfectly clear, or, whatever it is, or a steak grilled in a pan by hand that's just gonna like hit the spot in that like classic way. It's sort of like whatever techniques you need to employ to get to that desired outcome, you seem to be willing to employ them, kind of similar to what Leah was saying.
We're just like, just make it happen. People still need to eat. The food needs to go out. Just make it happen. Don't There's a gentleman named Nathan Myhrvold who I think he used to work for Hewlett Packard, so very much in the tech world, but he ended up transitioning to writing this encyclopedia of modern cooking called The Modernist Cuisine. He was quoted saying, "Is food art? And if it is, why must it not be bound by rules?" And then on the opposite side of it, I've had a chef in the past tell me, "Hey, don't take yourself too seriously. You're making art that ends up, we all know where it ends up in 24 hours." So it's like, it's sort of that finding that balance between the two, and just like with everything else, everything in moderation, everything balanced. Um, Respect the tradition, respect the classics, but don't be shackled by it. Be open to trying new things, be open to trying new technique, new flavors, new combinations. Why shouldn't roasted apple go with toasted cumin? Why does it have to go with cinnamon? Something like that, where it's like, yeah, you don't expect it, but shoot, why not try it? What's the worst that can happen?
I feel like maybe that's kind of like a beautiful little note to end on, unless either of the two of you had other things that you wanted to share or ask each other or ask me. I don't know.
No, I mean, I kind of love that too. Like, art can have rules, but it shouldn't always. I had a professor who said the only rule of sculpture is that it has to fit through the door. And I don't know. I just think it's, yeah. That's why we're artists. We're here to do something new and to make it happen.
To make it happen.
Well, I certainly appreciate the spirit of kind of like respect the rules, but don't be bound by them. Like, whether it's food, whether it's visual artwork, I think that's kind of a nice way of like trying to think flexibly as we go into the future, whatever our current future and then farther future may bring us. But I thank you both for taking this time on a Friday, a rainy Friday.
Yeah, thanks for including
Thanks to
us.
the Aspen Art Museum.
Yeah. Well, and we'll get to see each other in person, albeit maybe at a distance, but but sometime soon.
Great.
Yeah,
And thank you everyone for tuning in. And for anybody who is watching, who is a regular Slow Look Live viewer, next week is going to be our last one. We're going to bring our series to the close as we head into fall and we all turn our attentions to new things. But thank you for watching today. Thank you for Leah and David for joining us today. And it was nice to get the little view out the garage door of the inside and then a little bit of the outside there over at Anderson Ranch. So thank you both.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.